abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 80. We're up to Lamed test number 39. 39. All right. So, Beged Shachor, a black clothing, black garment, like my coat, my long coat that I wear. Well, actually not like mine, as we'll see. You can't shake it out if it's got snow or dust on it. Now, before we go further, we're specifically speaking about a new black garment. So a new one, at least in Talmudic times, the new ones, everyone kept very pristine. And if they got any dirt on these new ones, it affected the whole look. And we'll come back to this in a moment. So we can't shake off at least the new ones. But to take away a feather by hand, you can brush off a feather. There are those who are concerned even about brushing off a feather, but we don't need to be worried about that. So, only the new clothes. Now, nowadays, even new clothes doesn't necessarily apply. So the definition of when you're allowed to or not allowed to is, with this little bit of dust, would you walk into a wedding? Now, when I say a wedding, it doesn't have to be a wedding, but in other words, a place where you're particular about how you look. You know, some people work in factories or manual labor or various things, and an honest job is a good job. But in certain jobs, you get dirty. So you're not really worried about stains on your clothes during that time of the day, at least. But when you go out somewhere like a wedding, as an example, you wouldn't go with certain stains. You know, a little tiny thing maybe, but if it was something significant, you wouldn't wear it. So if the dust is, you would still wear it to a wedding, then there's no problem to remove it. So only new clothes. And we're talking about shaking it off. Then nowadays we have, the clothes brushes and the hat brushes and various things. Some people wear black hats. So you can use the clothes brushes. Again, some people are still concerned nowadays, even with the new ones. But when it's not new, it's not really a concern. Okay, reasonably straightforward. Any questions, comments? Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say, why new? Because when you go to a wedding, you probably put your newest clothes on, not your oldest.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, you would use your old one.
Yeah, it depends how closely related you are, whether you're just a guest or it's your simcha. But yes, but it's new clothes that they were very concerned about looking pristine. And by taking the dust off these brand new clothes, it was like you created the garments. So I think today, because we get new clothes more often, it used to be, people had one set of weekday clothes, one set of Shabbos clothes, and very rarely you got a new set of clothes. But today, Baruch Hashem, most of us have a nice closet full. And it's not as exciting when we get something new. Okay, Mem, number 40. So we did touch on this in a previous one, because we were speaking about cleaning clothes and we got onto shoes. But this is the one that if we get mud on our shoes, and we'll discuss it a little bit, but as I said, we discussed it the other week, and then we'll move on. So number 40, Mem. Tit sha'al ragloi oimanolov. Person got mud on his leg, his foot, or his shoe. Yachol asira b'davar shemutal taltaloi. You're allowed to remove it with something you can move on Shabbos. Now, obviously, there are things that are muksa on Shabbos. If it's something that's muksa, something we're not allowed to touch on Shabbos, then we can't use that to remove the mud. So, for example, a stick. A stick from the ground is muksa. So we can't pick up a stick to wipe off the mud. Just as a side point to this, sometimes whether a stick or something is muksa depends on what you had in mind before Shabbos began. So, twilight period, bein hashmoshes, between the candle lighting, well, a little after candle lighting, and so between sunset and nightfall, that's called bein hashmoshes. Whatever the status of the object is during that period, between nightfall and sunset, that's how it is for the whole Shabbos. So for an example, there was a rock, a stone, and a person generally doesn't use stones. So they had no intention to use it on Shabbos, and it was between nightfall and sunset. They weren't planning on using the stone. So now the stone is muksa the entire Shabbos. Even if 1 minute after sunset, you decided you wanted to use it. Likewise, the reverse. Maybe this person uses this stone as a doorstop. He has a door that he likes to prop open, and he puts the stone there. And so he has in mind, that's how he uses this stone. So when it's sunset, that period between sunset to nightfall, even though he's not using the stone at that moment, but he has the intention that he could use it as a doorstop, then the stone is not muksa. So if someone has a stick, I gave an example, picking up a stick, you can't use that because it's muksa, but sometimes people have a stick or a small piece of wood they might use to hold open a broken window. A window to hold it up, or there might be some other purpose. So it all depends on the intention when Shabbos began. So if it's something you're allowed to move on Shabbos, it's not muksa, you can use it to to clean off the mud. Or you can wipe your foot on a beam, a wooden beam. However, you can't wipe it on a wall or the ground. Now, this is primarily because we're concerned about the ground where it's could be a tolda, an offshoot, tolda of plowing or building. We're plowing, we're smoothing the ground is the plowing. The wall can be like building because you've a lot of stone walls, uneven, and if we scrape the mud along it, we're smoothing out the finish. So we can't use the wall or the ground, but we can use a beam. Now, time of great need, going for an example, it's not mud, it's excrement. We stepped in something, someone didn't clean up after their dog, and unfortunately someone stepped in it. And there's nothing around that you can move on Shabbos to clean it. You're allowed to wipe your foot or your shoe on a wall. And if there's no wall, then you could scrape on the ground, because here it certainly is not intentional. There's no intention to do it, even if you smooth it out. Then this that we also touched on the other week. If there's water available, you're allowed to wash the shoe. Gamba mayim, even in water, even if the shoe is leather. right? Fabric shoes could be problematic, but leather shoes don't absorb, and therefore there's no laundering problem. We'll skip the brackets. But with a knife, you're not allowed to scrape off the mud with a knife. But soya minaminal shall oil all excrement from the leather shoe with a knife. Now, the issue there is also the smoothing. We'll just finish the last sentence and then we'll discuss it a bit more. They used to sometimes have a piece of metal at their front doorstep. So this piece of metal that's in front of the house, it's used essentially, it was like a doormat. Used to scrape on this metal grate the feet before they went in. So that's what it's used for. If there's only one piece there, then we can't, because again, we're worried about the smoothing. But if there's multiple, then it's okay. So some of the issues, of course, we mentioned last time that if the mud or whatever stuck on the foot is dried, then we have an issue or potential issue of grinding on Shabbos. So we have to be careful not to grind, not to break up to little pieces. But presuming it's still moist or something, the issue that we have potentially with the leather shoe, if we scrape off with a knife, is smoothing things out. It's one of the steps in tanning leather. Right? So one of the things that we can't do on Shabbos is tan leather, tan hides. So they had hides that when they built the Mishkan, the roof was several layers, and some of them were skins. They were animal skins. So they tanned them, and since it was one of the techniques used in the construction of the Mishkan, in the tabernacle in the desert, so we can't do that on Shabbos. However, there are rabbinic authorities today who say that leather is processed differently today. And therefore, if you would scrape it off, you're not really making it smoother than it was. It's more finely processed today. So I didn't live, at least in this incarnation, 100, 200 years ago. So I'm not sure exactly what the leather shoes look like to compare them to today. But seemingly, our shoes today are much finer finish, much smoother already, and it's not going to make a difference so much if we scrape off even with a knife. The doormats we have today are no problem because they're soft. They're not going to smooth things out. Okay. So that shoes. Any questions before we move on? And again, a reminder for those who just joined, because I'm on the phone, I only see a few people at once. Can't see everyone at once. So putting up your hand doesn't help. Just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have a question.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Please. You said if there's pieces, is this with respect to like the doormat or the metal pieces? I'm thinking in my mind that it must be some kind of a doormat and sections. You said if there was more than one, it was all right to wipe the feet on, but otherwise not. If it was one piece.
I haven't seen any in modern times, but apparently in times past, excuse me, rather than a doormat, they had a piece of like a metal grate.
A metal grate.
Yeah, and they would just wipe their shoes on it before they entered the house and scraped off any mud. So if there's this one piece, essentially you're scraping the whole thing at the angle, and we've got the concern of smoothing out the leather soles. However, if there's more than one piece there, then it doesn't really do that. But as we said today, it's not so much of an issue because they the tanning is done a little bit differently today, and the leather's already much smoother to start with.
I see. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, 41, Mem Aleph. Yes?
Yeah. Suppose you do get mud on the bottom of your shoe. Can you, when you take your shoes off, can you smack them together to try and get the mud to come off?
Yes. And if that's going to work, that's probably the preferred option. Okay. Now, we're not worried about shoes. Let's say you get mud on your hands. You shouldn't wipe your muddy hands on a cloth that you normally use to dry or clean your hands. Why? Because we're worried what's going to happen is that when a person comes to dry their hands, they've got this muddy towel, they'll quickly rinse it out. And that is going to be doing laundry on Shabbos issue, which we can't do. So today we have disposable, wipes and disposable napkins and various things. So this isn't going to apply for disposable because you don't wash them out. You just throw them straight in the garbage. But, say a hand towel that you might use on Shabbos for other things. So we should try not to wipe the mud from our hands onto that. Okay, so 42. Before we go into 42, we're going to have an introduction. Any questions on anything we said till now before we start the introduction? No? Okay. So one of the malachas, one of the 39 techniques used to build the Mishkan was surveyor, was dyeing. So they dyed woolen threads. So the most famous ones was the techelis. It was like this blue, like a sky blue. There was like a purplish one. They dyed ram skins red, various things. So dyeing things different colors and designs potentially. This was one of the 39 techniques used in the building of the Mishkan. So therefore, the 39 techniques are what we can't do on Shabbos, 39 malachas. So we can't dye on, that's dyeing products. We don't want to dye either, but we don't want to dye other things, color things on Shabbos. Now, it's not only dyeing, if you, let's say you take a sheet that's bleached and now we make it red. So it's not only making a color, it's any meaningful idea. So that would be a design, a picture. So let's say, for an example, if someone not realizing was a problem on Shabbos, they painted a fruit bowl, picture of a fruit bowl. So that's not the malach of writing, that's the malach of dyeing. So any meaningful symbol, a picture, this is whether we use paint, we color it some other ways. It doesn't matter if it's walls, cabinets, utensils, fabric, anything that we're going to change the color or put in some type of meaningful design. So just use an example, there are people who, with lipstick, they put on a white napkin, the lip, like the kiss sort of image. So that is an intentional design. So that would be an issue as well. The painting is even if something's already painted. So let's say you have a blue wall and now you want to you paint it green. So even though it's already colored, it's also a problem. As a side point to this, polishing shoes. There's other issues of polishing shoes as well, but one of the issues, so you put on the, let's say, black shoe polish, and you have dyed it. Of course, there's also the smoothing out issue, which is working the leather, like part of the leather process. That could be a, if you buff it, all this can be a problem. Now, for dyeing, just by the way, it doesn't have to be a color, even colorless. So glaze, or put on something to make it shine. All of those come under this malacha. Right, so that's the background information we need to know. Any questions on this before we go into the actual paragraph? Yes.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes.
Please. This would also apply to black and white, or would the black and white design that somebody's drawing, would that be like writing?
No, that's also black and white, correct. Yeah.
What about dyeing flowers, Rabbi?
I have a question
dyeing
about
flowers.
41.
Okay, yeah, 41.
I don't have anything on 41. What was 41?
41 was wiping your hands on a towel so they got muddy.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's okay. So yeah, dyeing flowers can be a problem. Now, not in this halacha, but in general, there's a question whether dyeing applies to food. So if they're edible flowers, perhaps not. Worked with somebody once that their neighbor used to eat their flowers. They weren't very impressed. But so I'm not sure how many flowers are really edible, but if they're for decoration, then there's a problem with dyeing the flowers as well. If you dye it on Shabbos. Of course, if you set everything up before Shabbos and it slowly draws up the color over Shabbos, but you've put everything there before Shabbos, then that wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So 42, membase. Also, let's boya shum dover. You can't dye anything. A filo but sever she'ena miskayim. Even something that's not permanent. So, of course, this leads us to the question of what's called permanent. We're going to loosely say anything that'll last more than a few minutes. Sometimes something leaves a small impression, then it just fades away very quickly. I'm not saying that you should do that in the first instance, but after the fact, that's definitely not a problem. But anything that's going to last, even if it's not permanent. And therefore, also the isha it's boya paneha. A woman can't put on makeup on her face. She can't dye her face on Shabbos. So, although it used the example of women, men can't put on makeup on Shabbos either. But I guess they just use the more common example. So we can't put on makeup on Shabbos. Now again, that's an example of something it doesn't last forever. Even the so-called permanent makeup. Sometimes people for weddings or they use that. It's still a matter of days at most. So we can't put makeup on. The yesh desire, and a person should be careful. She yadav savurs and peiros. If a person's hands, they're dyed from fruit that they ate. So we'll give an example: pomegranates, and you got red all over your fingers. Shaloi yiga b'vigdoi. You shouldn't touch your clothes with it. Mipnei because you're going to dye them. right? So no deliberately spilling grape juice or wine down your shirt on Shabbos or Kiddush. Ochrein. V'chein dam chatmoi v'dam kasoi. Likewise, blood, someone has a bloody nose or a wound. You shouldn't wipe it on a cloth. And again, we're talking about one now where there's going to be a permanent stain. Today, where we have disposable, that's not an issue. We can use the disposable. So before we discuss disposable, we'll just go on another slight tangent. And that is to understand that a malacha has to be constructive. So what do we mean by constructive? So we'll give a totally different example just to get the idea. So we know we can't build on Shabbos. Now, we can't demolish on Shabbos. Why can't we demolish on Shabbos? Because it's demolishing in order to build. So when they built the Mishkan, or they used to take it down, it was portable. They would take it down, transport it, then set it back up. So when they took it down, they weren't demolishing the building to destroy it. It was in order to build. So an example of this today would be, let's say someone was remodeling and, they're opening up a doorway or an arch in a wall. So demolishing part of the wall, but why are they doing it? Because, they're going to smooth it out. They're going to make a doorway, put in a door frame or an archway, and they're demolishing in order to build. Or they're taking away a part of a house and they're doing renovations, they're building a new room, whatever it is. Now, if someone is just vandalism, they're just there to smash. Now, obviously, we don't do things like that, and you definitely can't smash other people's property. But we're just speaking about the actual malacha. If someone was just smashing, then he's not doing the malacha, he's not doing the act of demolishing, because it's for destructive purpose. Now, rabbinically, we don't do that either on Shabbos, because when it comes to intention like that, we're concerned that people, first of all, they could change their mind, or they claim to have one intention when really there's another intention. And also, we don't want to do things that exert ourselves on Shabbos, so we don't demolish even destructively either. But let's say using a napkin. Have a napkin, and you've got something on your hands, and you're wiping it on the napkin. So although it may, I'm talking about disposable napkins now, even though it may be dyeing the napkin, but it's destructive. It's not dying to be constructive. Dying to you make a nice design, you make it the color you want, you change it how you want it to be, but just wiping dirt, essentially. I mean, maybe it's edible, but for this purpose is dirt, just to wipe that on a napkin, then that's destructive. And of course, when it's disposable, is absolutely no problem. When it's a permanent, when it's a, like a material fabric napkin that we use, if it's a type of stain that's going to stay permanently, then we don't do that on Shabbos. But again, if it's just wiping something off our hands and it's going to go in the laundry right after Shabbos and it'll all come out, then it's also not a problem because it's destructive.
You mean destruction is permitted?
Well, I won't say it's permitted, but it doesn't break this law of Shabbos. In general, we should try not to destroy things. We have a separate mitzvah, Bal Tashkis. So Bal Tashkis is we can't wantonly destroy or waste. So again, I'll give an example. When Hashem created the world, Hashem gave it over to humanity to utilize. So we are allowed to utilize the resources in this world. So for an example, a person will use wood to build a house. So it means they chop down some trees. Hashem gave us permission to do this, to essentially destroy trees, but it's for a constructive purpose. But just to chop down trees for, maybe you'll make farmlands, also a constructive purpose. But just to, for the sake of it, or just to wantonly destroy or wastefully destroy, that's Bal Tashlis. So someone has something old that they're not going to use anymore. There are opportunity stores, there's charities, there's placement give it to. But to throw out something that is good, obviously if it's become a rag, it's sometimes we rarely wear things out and it belongs in the garbage. But if it's something that someone else could use, then throwing it away could be Bal Tashlis. We need to try and not wantonly destroy or waste. So although just smashing does not violate Shabbos in that respect because it's destructive, but there's still the Bal Tashlis problem. Just happens to be at the moment we're talking about Shabbos. This is why I would say even Jewishly, it's good to recycle a little bit. I'm not sure we have to. Some people make, again, I'm not criticizing anybody, each their own. But for some people, recycling and environmentalism becomes their religion. That's the whole life focus. But if we can do things in a more efficient way, for example, they have plantations just for wood. So instead of chopping down the old forests that are habitat for the animals, and they have these wood farms essentially. So they plant out whole section 1 year, the next year, then say over 10 years, and then year 11 they harvest the first section and then replant it, and then each year they move along and they keep going in circles. So people have wood for building, people have wood for furniture, but it's a little more efficient, less wasteful. So if we can do things less wasteful way, then we should. Okay. Any questions? Okay, just number 43. We'll just also mention for the dying. We mentioned, although it's not in this particular halacha, but the many opinions say that it's doesn't apply to food. Okay. All right. 43. We don't put karkum as a spice into various foods because it dyes it. Now, this is according to the opinion, or that we're least concerned about dyeing for food. So there's different editions of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch of the abridged code of Jewish law. So just to give a little bit of history, it was written by Rabbi Shlomo Ganzfried. He was a rabbi in Hungary. I'm not sure if where he was is actually the country Hungary today, but in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For example, the main area of Jewish Hungary was Pressburg, which became Czechoslovakia. So, but we'll call it Jewish Hungary. They say the real border, for example, the border between Russia and Poland kept moving throughout the years. So they say the real border, they call it the gefilte fish line. When you get to the Polish side of the border, they add sugar to the gefilte fish. And on the Russian side, they don't. So they used to joke between the wars, that was the real border. So the borders of countries today, we can't say exactly what they are, but when Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried was alive, that was considered Hungary, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and he made an abridged version of the Code of Jewish Law. Not so much in the laws of Shabbos, but in other areas, particularly family purity. Very often he says, well, if this happens, ask a rabbi. And then 2 paragraphs later, and if this happens, ask a rabbi. Because in an abridged work, you can't put every possible case or factor. So it's just a summary, essentially. So when he summarized it, he chose certain views where there's discussion, and there's been other versions made. So for an example, I have in front of me a version that was, came out about 25 years ago, and it has the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch Harav, right? Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, those who go to the Tanya class, he's also the author of the Tanya, and he put together a modern, for his times, Code of Jewish Law. He updated it. Unfortunately, not all of it was printed. Some of the manuscripts were burnt in fires, but the majority of the Shabbos laws are in existence. And so this version, of the Code of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch that I have, has his rulings as well, in brackets, in parentheses. And there's others I've seen that mention the opinions of the Chazon Ish or Avad Yosef, various people. So amongst others, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he rules that dyeing does not apply to food. So in which case you could put different colored foods together. So a practical example of this, with some people like to mix, let's say, grape juice and seltzer, as an example. So if you're worried about it, and I guess to go according to everyone, doesn't hurt to make sure whatever you do goes according to all opinions. So you would pour the grape juice first. Let's say you're doing half a cup of each. You put in the half a cup of grape juice, and then you add the seltzer, because you're making the color lighter, but you're not putting color in. While if you did it the other way around, you're coloring the seltzer. But as I said, probably most views are of the opinion that dyeing does not apply to food. So, if you can organize it that you don't color food, good. And if not, don't worry about it. Okay. Now, again, we're speaking about, okay, any questions before we move on? No? Okay, so that means either we've explained it very well, or so poorly no one has any idea what we're talking about. Hopefully the first one. So as we said before, a malach on Shabbos, a action you can't do on Shabbos, to be a Torah prohibition has to be constructive. So tearing is part of the malacha of sewing, because sometimes to do repair, you have to tear a little bit. You either tear it or undo the stitches to be able to fix it up properly, how it is. So again, I'm not talking about the Baal Tashlis, not talking about the wasteful, that's a separate mitzvah. But just in respect to Shabbos, if someone just tore something up destructively, that is not a Shabbos issue. It might be it's other issues, right? Because we shouldn't waste things. Maybe someone has anger issues they need to work out. Need to work on their midas, their self-development. But it's not a Shabbos issue. But if it's a tear that is to achieve something, then that's a problem. So I'll give an example. Sometimes when you buy a book, there are sometimes you have pages that are still stuck together. Let's say at the bottom or the top, and you can't turn the page. You have to tear the bottom. Okay, so that's a tearing. It's also a malacha called makah patish. It's like the final touch to finish a product. That's another one of the 39 malachas. It's actually a part of all of them. And that is if something is completely finished and all it needs is just one small action to make it perfect, then that's a malacha as well. And this is because as they assembled the Mishkan, you've got the beams and the sockets, and you give it one little hit with a hammer, and now it stands up. So a current day example of this would be electric lights. So, some people mistakenly believe that the reason we can't turn on electric lights is because of making a fire on Shabbos. So most modern light bulbs don't have any flame. Some of them don't burn anything, really. So what's the issue? The issue is you have all the circuits set up on the wall. Got your switch, all the circuits, everything's going straight to the light, the current of electricity, it's all there. All that's lacking is that there's two little bits that are just a tiny drop away from each other. And by flicking the switch, instead of being away from each other, they make contact. And that closes the circuit. And the electricity goes through the wires and it turns the light on. Or whatever other appliance we're using.
Rabbi?
So I'll just finish 1 second.
Rabbi?
1 second. That's makah patish. That is that final hit with the hammer. It's all set up to go. Just needs that one little touch to close the circuit. Yes, what was your question?
At the risk of being a little improper, as far as tearing, the most applicable item is toilet paper.
Yes. Yeah. So, although we mentioned, I would mention it briefly. Although we try to use, say, pre-separated tissues, a lot of tissues in the box are totally disconnected. That would be the ideal for Shabbos. But if someone didn't have, you can tear not on the perforated line. Perforated line is part of this issue of finishing off a vessel, because it's like the cut's been made, it's all perforated, and you take off now, you get this perfect piece. But if you'll just tear it somewhere, then that's destructive tearing. It's not in the first instance. We should try and have our tissues or various things, because although we're tearing destructively, it's because we have a purpose we want to use it for. It's not just tearing up and throwing it on the floor.
They're still separating.
But if someone got stuck without tissues and all they have is the roll of toilet paper, then in that situation, you can tear it not on the perforated line, tear it somewhere in the middle of the piece.
Rabbi?
Yes.
This is Louise. When I was in Israel, the issue of the toilet paper use came up, and this was with regard to the Chagim, not only Shabbat, but the rabbi explained that it's worse than a regular tear to tear along the perforated line. I thought, obviously now it seems mistakenly, that it was because each separate tear along the perforation was a separate tear, but I guess it's not that. I guess it's because of the finishing off. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It's the finishing, because you've now got a finished product. It's partly opened and you take on that line, and now you have a finished product.
I see.
It's designed to be made that way, to take along, and there you have a finished piece for the use. So it's better just to tear it down the middle somewhere. And correct, you made a very good point. Applies to the Chagim as well. Most of the malachas, of course, apply to the festivals as well. There are exceptions, right? The festivals, because we have a mitzvah to cook, to have oichel nefesh, it's called, to be able to have nice foods to honor the yontiv. So things that are part of the process of cooking. Now that means things that have to be done that day. You know, if someone was going to, you know, let's say make a steak, you don't have to buy the cow on Yom Kippur, on the festival. You could have bought the cow the day before. So you're not allowed to buy the cow. But, you know, actually cooking it, you know, even shechting it. Although today we slaughter, you know, we buy, you know, put, you know, in the old days didn't have refrigerators and freezers. So a second day festival day, if you wanted fresh meat, you had to, you had to slaughter the meat freshly. So from that point onwards, essentially, anything that's part of the cooking, and once it's permissible for cooking, that you could use for other things. So for an example, carrying. We're allowed to carry something. Okay, many cities have an Eruv today. You can carry anyway, but if there's no Eruv, then since you're allowed to carry the food, so you can carry other things you need for Yom Tov, a machzor, keys, various things. But otherwise, you know, things like this, let's say tearing, would be the same rule on Shabbos as we have on Yom Tov. Another example of tearing is opening packages, packages of food. You know, you have a pack of chips or, you know, any food item. They come in plastic packaging, tearing those open. So again, tearing them open is generally a destructive act. Here you had a nice package that kept this food fresh, and you've torn it open, it's never going to go back. You know, the packet of chips that you've torn open, you can't reseal them where you've torn it. So it's a destructive act. You've ruined the vessel that the food was in. So we're allowed to tear open packages of food on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Ideally, you should be careful not to tear on the words, where there's words, because, you know, if you tear right through the middle of a word, you've erased, so to speak, and no longer the two parts of the word aren't connected anymore. So you sort of erase that word. But if there's no other way, since it's a destructive act, it's not such an issue. But in the first instance, one should avoid tearing where there's letters, either through a word or through a letter.
Rabbi?
Yes.
With respect to cooking for Hagim, when it comes to Shabbat, isn't there, I mean, maybe I'm a little confused, I'm sure I am, but with respect to Eruv Tavshilin, isn't that to allow, I mean, I would never have thought of shechting an animal, but then of course I don't live in the old times like that during the Chag, but wouldn't the Eruv Tavshilin with the cooking of the egg and the reciting of the blessing allow one to do this food preparation actions throughout the 3 days or the 2 days?
So the Eruv Tavshilin, okay, regardless of Eruv Tavshilin or anything else, we still can't cook on Shabbos. So just put that aside, right?
Okay.
The Eruv Tavshilin is to allow us to cook on Yom Tov. Now, just to step back a step, so we can get the background before we answer the question. We know that Shabbos is stricter than a Yom Tov, than a festival. Shabbos is stricter, so it overrules. So according to biblical law, you are allowed to cook on a festival for Shabbos. So let's say the festival is Tuesday. No, sorry. Festival is Friday and Shabbos Friday night. You're allowed to cook on Friday on the festival biblically for the Shabbos because Shabbos takes priority over the festival. Our sages, and when I say our sages, it's talking about biblical times, times of King David. The sages were concerned that if people can cook on Friday for Shabbos without any type of reminder, then they could come to a basic mistake. The mistake could be they may begin to believe, have a false assumption, you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, on a festival, for after the festival. Now, of course, when after the festival is Shabbos, Shabbos overrules the festival, but they might think now, oh, I cooked on a Friday for the next day. So the next Chag, the next festival is Tuesday. Maybe I'm allowed to cook because, I'm going to have my family over on Wednesday, which of course you can't do. So therefore, they instituted Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin is a small ceremony. We will explain what it is, how you do it in a moment, but it's a small ceremony that's a reminder to telling us, why am I allowed to cook on this festival for after festival? Because of Shabbos, and only because of Shabbos. And that is going to stop people from making that error. So that's why it was instituted. So it allows us to cook on the festival for Shabbos. Of course, to cook on the festival for the festival itself, we're already allowed to do. And this allows us to cook on the festival for Shabbos, but we can never cook on Shabbos, whether for Shabbos or for a festival. So just in case someone's not familiar, the Erev Tavshilin, what we do is we start our Shabbos preparations. So you take ideally two cooked items that you're going to use on Shabbos. So let's say, for an example, a bread roll and a piece of chicken. And you take them together, and you make a blessing and a statement that this is you're doing this to begin your Shabbos preparations. And by doing this, I'm now allowed to cook, to light fires, to whatever you need to do, the various steps in order to be able to prepare for Shabbos. And then you put those foods aside, and in the first instance, they need to be eaten on Shabbos. So if you eat it on Shabbos, that way it was already part of your preparations. And therefore, it's like what you are doing on the festival. It's just a continuation of what you started before the festival. Okay. Any other questions about Erev Tavshilin or anything else? No?
Rabbi, yeah,
Yes.
you started to mention about a parcel, and you didn't get to the answer. Like, let's say a sefer comes, something that's not muksa, and you can open the package without tearing through the letters, and a person could say that's destructive. It's almost like opening up a package of crackers.
Yeah, the problem is if it arrived on Shabbos, well, let's first deal if it arrived on Shabbos. Right? If it arrived on Shabbos or Yom Tov, then it is muksa. It's compared to an egg that was laid on Shabbos. Okay, although unlike the egg didn't exist. I mean, it did in the chicken's body, but as a separate entity, it didn't exist. This parcel may have existed. Could have, be sent from Australia, and it was 5 days in transit. So it existed, but it arrives to you on Shabbos, then it's considered like it was born on Shabbos, so to speak, like an egg, and therefore it actually is muksa on Shabbos. However, if it arrived before Shabbos, and you don't have the muksa issue, then, I guess technically, if you can just tear it apart, but ideally one should have done that before Shabbos.
I'm just thinking if a person brought over a parcel that contained food for Shabbos.
Yeah, the food is not is for sure is not a problem.
Tammy,
Yeah,
play your feet. Play them.
so for an example,
Play them on your feet.
so for an example, let's say someone brought over a gift hamper type thing. So it's all packaged up. There's no problem to open that up on Shabbos. All right.
I'm a little confused.
Yes.
Okay, so you said that if it needed one small act to become perfect, that's construction, so you cannot do it.
Correct.
Does that mean that you can do something like tearing, unsticking things together if it still is not completed, if the product still is deficient, and then it's permitted for that reason?
No, so we're talking about so let's just define the two things a little bit better, and then we'll answer. So we're talking about the one little thing to complete it. Let's use the example. Let's say you have a chair, and the last bolt to hold it together it's in the hole where it needs to go, but you need to hit it with a hammer a few times just so it'll be steady, and that's now it's now finished chair, and you can sit on it. So that's the type of thing we're talking about. You have something that's basically completed. It just needs that final little act to totally complete it, like the light.
And this is not permitted.
So that's what you can't do on Shabbos, right? That's the malachim. That's the prohibition on Shabbos.
Because you completed it.
Yes, because you completed. But a package, let's say a packet of chips, and you tear it open, you've actually done opposite of completing. You've destroyed it. Right? It's a destructive act. That package that was keeping the chips fresh and airtight has now been destroyed. So
I thought that was the leniency for food.
Correct.
So take a package of napkins instead of a package of food.
Yeah, a package of napkins is you could also tear open the plastic. Again, ideally, the more we can do before Shabbos, so if you just have napkins in a, they come in a clear plastic bag.
Say you have more guests than you expected and you need the next package of napkins now.
Yeah.
It's ready for dinner time, lunchtime.
Yeah.
I have a question.
You could tear it open. You could tear open the napkins, yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that I didn't realize you could do. You can tear things open. As long as you left it damaged, it's okay.
Yes. Now, again, as much as we can beforehand. So let's say, for an example, there are a lot of people who, say on the wine, you have a seal. They try and, cut it before Shabbos. When it has words on it, and when you break it open, it takes apart the words, that's more problematic. Right, but ideally, you're planning to use, let's say, a bottle of wine, or depends how many guests you have, 2, 3, whatever it is, for the kiddush. Ideally, one should open the seal before Shabbos. But if you didn't, I guess the word's complicated, but if it's not a one with, well, at least where you tear it, it's not words, or cut it with a knife, then it's not a problem to break it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let's say I'm supposed to get a flower on Friday, and the people that are supposed to bring it were delayed. But I prepared the vase with water. Like 10 minutes after Shabbos, it's arrived. Am I allowed to put it in the water?
So you can't. You can ask the person who delivered it to put it in.
The guy that delivered happened to be a guy that he's late too, is a Jew too. Then what?
Okay.
You got a problem.
Then that's even more problematic.
So what do you do?
Unfortunately, in that case, there's not a lot you can do. To put it in the water in the first instance on Shabbos is, that's we can't do that. things that have been in water, adding water, there's different things. But something that's currently not in water, to actually put it into the water, unfortunately, you're stuck. And the truth is, if they arrived after Shabbos, they're muksa anyway. So you really can't do anything with them.
So the only way to put it in the fridge until the Shabbos is over, right?
Yeah, you could do that. Or if the delivery person wasn't Jewish, you can ask them to put it down where you want it. You could ask, you could, rather than say, can you please put them in the water for me? You can say, oh, the vase over there, a little more indirect.
Exactly. Yeah.
But unfortunately, if it comes particularly via a Jewish person after Shabbos has started, stuck.
Yeah, not allowed to say it. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to verify it because it's been done and I said not to do it, but he didn't listen to me. Prove it. People jumpy when you tell them something to do, not to do, and whatever. So I have to, it's a lot of education.
Yes. Sometimes, although many times, if all things being equal, we're trying to give our business to a fellow Jew to support another Jewish person. But there may be times, such as this, if they're delivering after Shabbos, that may be better to do business with someone else.
All right. Live and learn.
Yes. All right. So I think we've gone over time. Any other questions before we finish up?
Can you, I meant to ask you and I forgot. Erev Tavshilin. What is the Erev Tavshilin? Like you are not allowed to cook on Shabbos anyway, right? So what's the Erev Tavshilin does?
It enabled you to cook on Yom Tov, on the Chag, the festival that's prior to Shabbos. So you cook on it. Let's say the Chag is Thursday or Friday. It's Thursday, Friday. Enables you to cook on those days for Shabbos.
Yeah, but what's happened on the Chag itself? Am I allowed to cook?
Yes, you can cook on the Chag for the Chag, and the Erev Tavshilin now allows you to cook on the Chag for Shabbos as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We wish everyone a wonderful week, wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Look forward to meeting you all someday in person.
We hope so.
And anyone who
Take
comes
care.
on vacation to Phoenix, please let me know.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I just want to be absolutely certain. So it is possible then to cook on the Chag for Chag, a separate
Yes.
issue from Shabbat.
Correct. You cook on the Chag for the Chag, providing, for that day of. So when it's a 2-day Chag, you can only cook on that day for that day.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's helpful.
All right.
All right. Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.